Banging.
Sweet. Well, my little red light is on, so we are.
Your little red light is on. I bet you tell all the girls that.
So yeah, I'll just kick it off by saying welcome to the show with me, Dan, and my guest, Nick Twigger.
Thanks for having me, man.
You good?
I'm very well in these quite unprecedented times.
What are you talking about?
The coronavirus, COVID-19. You never heard of it? It's a big deal.
No, I didn't. It should have been on the news more, I guess.
Yeah, it should have been on YouTube. Like, yeah, you'd think they'd put videos about this up, but nah.
So, yeah, I thought, well, we've chatted about this before, but I know that we'll just sort of see how the conversation goes. And, whenever we've chatted before, we usually have like 3-hour conversations or 2 to 3 hour conversations about various things. But yeah, I just thought we'd start by just asking you if there's anything you've been thinking about recently, anything that you would like to talk about, really, or ask me about, and go from there.
Well, the first thing and the biggest thing is that it's actually, it's one of these things I've been thinking about for a while, but the coronavirus outbreak really kind of like put it into the forefront for me. It was really how objective people are and how can I put this? How certain of their own opinions they are, whilst in actual fact being grossly uneducated.
Right. Okay.
So, an example of this would be if we use the coronavirus. Like we live in the UK, so all the information I have is pretty much UK based. And in the UK, Boris Johnson, who's the Prime Minister, he took a little longer than people wanted him to before he started imposing restrictions. It was just kind of like a very light message before then. And a lot of people I know, anyway, were very, very vocal and very quite angry and frustrated that he wasn't doing more and that more things weren't happening. Despite, Boris Johnson's chief medical officer, or I can't remember the guy's name, but he came up and he kind of explained the logic behind it. And don't get me wrong, I was and am in the camp that I think, I do think restrictions during this time are a good way to go. But at the same time, all I could think was, realistically, on like quarantine practices and giant global pandemics like this, I don't actually know anything about that. It's not as if I've researched it. I'm just kind of going off my own logic. And I'm sure that medical... Go on.
No, sorry. I was just going to ask, do you think it was because any of these people already had something against Boris Johnson anyway?
Well, yeah, totally. I totally think it comes down to that whole tribal party. No, I'm right wing, we go this way, or no, I'm left wing, we go this way. But and don't get me wrong, people on both sides are guilty of it. To say something in like this is so objectively like, oh, this, my opinion, I believe to be 100% fact. Like, even if you're a scientist, I think, like even if you're like a disease... I've listened to disease specialists on other podcasts talk about it, and even they're like, yeah, we're going to kind of see what happens here, because no one alive has ever really been through this, so we don't know what's going to happen, really.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? Sometimes the people that know the most are the most unsure about their opinions.
Yeah, it's weird. The older I get, the more distrusting I get of people who are so certain on things. Because the older I get, the more I'm like, I don't fucking know, and neither does anyone else.
Yeah. So you feel that people were quick to gain an opinion on this in the very early days before we knew anything about it?
Yeah, I think people were very quick to go, oh no, this is the thing we should do, this is the thing we have to do, this is objectively the thing we must do. I can't believe he thinks any differently, that's unfathomable. Which to me, I was like, well, I think this, but fuck knows whether it's right or wrong, It's just not... Also, I'm not a disease specialist, and neither is anyone else I know, so to be so black and white on such a subjective unknown, I really do believe it is madness to me. I mean, the same thing happened with Brexit on people both for and against it.
Yeah.
To dumb something as complicated as being part of the European Union down to a black and white, good or bad, no, this is objectively the way it is, to me is just like, whoa, how, like you don't even, if you've been to the EU, you know, kind of the formal structure, how it works, what they do, what they don't do, what our government can do on its own, what they can't, you know how that whole intricate network and web works, because I fucking don't.
Yeah. Why do you think that is? Why do you think we're so quick to? Because I know that I've done it.
Oh, we've all been guilty of it. Like I sit here
Yeah.
preaching, but it's like I'm as guilty as this is more than most.
But why do you think that is? Why do you think you've seen a lot of that with this and with Brexit? Why do you think people are very quick to, I guess, form an opinion and then make it very vocal?
So with the coronavirus, I think it's because... Well, with the coronavirus, I think it's most likely because... Like if shit does go down, if things do go wrong, if like, you know, society does fall, that's a big thing. So I think really the message people are coming from is like, we should be, it's better to be safe than sorry, which, yeah, it's kind of where I come from as well. But at the same time, to then invoke anger from that, like, stance on it, like, oh, why aren't you being safe rather than sorry? It's like, well, you're asking a lot of people to just kind of stop for an unknown amount of time. I really think it would be a good idea to engage your empathy here and try and look at it from someone else's point of view. So,
Nice.
so I don't know. I can appreciate why people can see things as black and white on the coronavirus. The Brexit example with people being so objectively yes or no to Brexit, to me is madness because it's not really a big deal. Although maybe because nothing really happened in a long time. Like the tiniest thing got blown out of proportion. It's not that it's a tiny thing, but
Yeah, no, and maybe now this has happened, we the people that saw the end of the world because of Brexit are now sort of seeing it in more sensible terms that no, that Brexit wasn't the end of the world.
yeah, totally. I mean, I really. Oh, this kind of sounds horrible, but I really hope that more good comes out of this whole global pandemic thing than bad. I really hope it kind of humbles people and makes people go, oh man, all that dumb stuff that I used to focus on. Why did I focus on that? Who cares? I really hope this engages like people's kindness, their humbleness, their empathy. I don't know if it will. You know, who knows what's going to happen? But I really and I know there's a lot of bad is going to come from this. A lot of deaths, a lot of strain on society, a lot of mental problems with people being in isolation for a long time. It's going to be a struggle, and I can see that and appreciate it. But I'm really hoping people that this is like a huge benefit to the world in the long run.
Well, and to be honest, I don't think that's a controversial view. I think everyone, whatever situation they're in, if it's the worst of the worst, or you know, they're in an extremely comfortable position right now, everyone's hoping the best, aren't they? They're hoping something good comes out of it. So I think most people feel that way. And I mean, just as a caveat that we're both on the same page, and I think just so we know that we're not going down the wrong path, but we both, obviously, like you just said, we're aware there's going to be a horrendous amount of bad stuff that comes out of this. But on that point, what do you think realistically, more realistically, do you think will be good things that come out of it?
Well, the first and biggest thing for me is we've seen a lot more funding. I'm pretty sure that we've seen a lot more funding from the government go into the NHS. And I hope, moving after this, like the money that was put in, they kind of see like, okay, we're actually just going to keep giving more money to the NHS from now on because it's very clear that we didn't do that in the past, and that may have put us in a little bit of a compromised position. It's also, you know, it's healthcare for everyone, and I do think, and you know, it's got a lot of problems. It's not perfect. It's awesome that we have it and it's free, but I think it could be a lot better than it is. And I think a lot of people suffer because it's lacking in a lot of areas, all which derive from a lack of funding.
Yeah, I think.
Oh, go on.
Sorry, carry on what you're going to say.
Well, I was going to say that's kind of the first part we've got going on, but also on a more maybe societal level, I just think people stop taking things for granted, and we're all guilty of it. Just like, I live in a city in Newcastle. It's pretty dense, and up north people are a little bit friendlier, but still on the metro you see people like everyone's on their phone, no one's really talking to each other, and that's because for the longest time, for my entire life and the life of my parents, there were a shitload of human beings, way more human beings compared to anything else. So they were never really a commodity. It's like, oh, look, a human, I could talk to them, but they are everywhere, so why would I talk to them? Whereas now, it's like, well, you're probably stuck inside with a handful of people you can talk to on a regular basis and do stuff with. Hopefully coming out of this, everyone's a little bit nice, a little more humble, a little more, hey, we've got some real problems in society that we need to focus on, that we could fix, but have ignored until now.
Yeah, sure. And I guess on that point, I guess having a common enemy can really bring people together. And luckily, this common enemy is not a country or a person. It's a non-sentient virus. So yeah.
I think there's a quote from a former a US president of where they said something on the lines of, I'm going to totally fuck this up, but they said something on the lines of, if aliens ever attack, the world will be pretty united then. And they were so right. It's really quite a horrible truth that humans kind of need something to push against.
Right, yeah.
It's not necessarily a horrible truth, maybe, but it's definitely one of those, we definitely need some form of resistance.
And I guess in the sort of tribalism thing of people needing a tribe of some sort, or people wanting to feel part of something, whether that's just their family or wider than that, it might be a political party or an ethnic group or whatever it is, those sort of divides between these tribes suddenly loosen a bit because they're part of a bigger tribe, which is, in theory anyway, people come together and we're part of this anti-coronavirus tribe. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. It's I think
well.
People are social creatures. We all want that. Well, the vast majority of us anyway. We either want or need and have that desire for a sense of community, a sense of belonging. And I think it's just it's also kind of an uncomfortable truth that realistically, people who are similar to us, we generally do find easier to get along with. When I was at school, generally speaking, the white kids would hang out with the white kids. The Indian guys would all hang out with each other as well. And don't get me wrong, that there was a lot of people. I would have friends where everyone was a different color, no one gave a shit, and no one ever did. But the fact still remains, those groups still kind of decided to generally contain within themselves.
Yeah, and maybe it's one of the things about our human nature that we need to be more aware of, and to in being aware that's how we sort of maybe naturally go. We can start to notice that within ourselves, and then do things to make it better and improve it. Because I would argue that we don't want to be living in a world where people just go to where they feel naturally they're going to go to in terms of ethnic divides and things like that. We need to if we have that natural urge to do that, to stay with our own kind, or whatever sort of label you want to put on it, that's something we definitely need to move away from. And we're not living in a world like that anymore. We're living in a world where we can be a lot more diverse in we can strive to be a lot more diverse in the way that we interact with others.
Well, I definitely think it's good to be humbled once in a while, to be thrown outside of your comfort zone, because then it makes you put in more effort and really have a better perspective on you and your own bullshit. But because
yeah.
we all, like, we've all been at some point fed lies, maybe we've made something up by accident, we've all got a certain amount of bullshit in us. But the more you put yourself in positions where you're not comfortable, maybe you're learning and it's better for you and it's making you stronger, but there's a bit of resistance there. It makes you really, really see, like, and really, really look at it introspectively, like, hey, this is me. This is what I am. Maybe I'm not as tough as I thought I was. Maybe I'm not as loving as I thought I was. I don't know. But I think putting yourself in situations that make yourself a little uncomfortable, they got a bit of resistance to them. I think that's a major benefit, because I think it makes you nicer to others, because you realize, man, I'm not all that.
Yeah. Okay. Well, back to the sort of points you were making about what good will come out of this. So you said the NHS, and you said you sort of hope that people appreciate each other more. Is that sort of what you were saying? Like,
yeah, I suppose going back to the NHS point, I hope it's not just like, more money's been put into the NHS now. I hope that does continue, and the government do see that as a better way to go in future. But it's also, I hope this makes people generally value humanity more, and because of that, put more money into things that really require it, like homelessness, for example. Like in the UK, we have a surplus of food and yet a huge homelessness problem, yet we're a relatively wealthy country. It's clear we have all the resources and capacity to just annihilate homelessness to the point where it's not a thing unless someone is choosing it. Yeah.
well, a lot of homelessness has gone down now. Well, depends on your definition of homelessness, but a lot of homeless people have now been put up in hotels and things like that.
That's fucking awesome. That's fantastic. I'm going to assume that's true, and that's an amazing fact right there. The fact that, man, when things really go down, we're there for like I suppose what we'd call the bottom of society here. I really hope that kind of idea of thinking continues once this is done, whatever that kind of world looks like.
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult. I really obviously hope that as well. I think with the homelessness thing, the cynical side of it is like they're just doing it to stop the spread of infection and the worry. So my girlfriend works for a homeless charity, and one of the worries is that we slip back in terms of homelessness. We slip back into the norm after this, and the hotel thing is just a temporary measure just to stop the spread. But obviously, the way I feel about the sort of measures that the government is doing now is, I hope it's going to be, and I really would put a lot of money on it definitely being in the case with the NHS, but I hope that because of all these measures that are going in, it's going to be a lot harder for the government to pull back on them. And obviously they can't keep up what they're doing now. The economy is very rapidly going downhill. But things like more funding for the NHS, more action on homelessness, I hope that is going to be a lot harder, because politically, if they start pulling back on a load of this stuff, it's going to be very difficult for them politically.
I hope that's true. I have a you know this from knowing me, but I have an inherent distrust in politics, the political system, the way rules are kind of put in place. In most westernized countries, I have a real issue with the way that system works. The UK is included.
So what about the system do you not agree with, or what do you think needs to be improved? Or
So the biggest thing for me is, oh God, I can't believe I'm about to say this. The biggest thing for me is, I don't think the proportional representation is a good idea anymore. Like,
what do you mean?
It made sense way back when it was like, hey, it's not really feasible for everyone to kind of state what they do or don't want this. We can't really have that. So we'll just elect someone, and then they'll go and debate it, and we'll make that a kind of upper echelon of people. Whereas now, a referendum, for example, the government could make an app for that, and definitely, of course, there are security concerns, but there's also genuine concerns with having people count votes, which is to me just the most foolish system you could do. Like, I'm a human being. I like to think I'm relatively well educated. I can't count for anything. My maths is garbage. Maybe that's me saying that I can't count, so neither can anyone else. I don't know.
Thing is, I'm not going to use any of the rest of this podcast. I'm just going to have a clip of you repeating, "I can't count."
But it's, I mean, yeah, I just think, I also think the way it kind of works in government is a foolish way. I question how much valuable time MPs actually get to properly think about a rule or a law or the way society works and have any real impact to it. I mean, I've been here for 27 years now on this planet, in this country, and haven't really seen a lot of growth led from government, personally.
Okay, so I'm still a bit confused about so the proportional representation thing. What exactly do you mean that you have? What exactly do you have an issue with that?
Okay, so okay, so I guess the way it works in the UK is everyone elects their local representative. That representative then goes to Parliament. Parliament gets to have a say, gets to have a vote, and then if Parliament agree or disagree on something, if they agree something, it goes forward. If they disagree, it doesn't. My problem with this is I'm voting for a total fucking stranger. I don't know if they are. I don't know this person. I don't know if they're legit. I don't know if they're well educated on subjects. I don't know if they've just got a team of people that they're saying, "Hey, check. You should say this because more than 50% of voters agree with it."
Right. So you have the problem with someone being in power or representing you that you don't know.
That could be totally illegitimate, and there's no one really to hold them accountable for that.
Well, are you talking about MPs, so individual MPs?
Yeah. If we're talking about MPs, but because everything is essentially split down to, hey, you vote left or you vote right, and that is the end of it.
Well, not less so in this country. In America, it's very much more so that way. I don't even know if there is any other parties apart from Democrats and Republicans. Whereas we do have more diversity here.
But realistically, do we? Because we have those additional parties, but every year it's either Labour or Conservative, and the vast majority of seats in Parliament are Labour or Conservative.
So there's a problem live with, when you say not knowing the MP, what do you mean by that? Because obviously you can't know. What do you mean by that? What's the problem with not knowing them?
I mean, that
do you want to know more?
That is a stranger. That is not someone you know. That is not someone you like. How can you trust someone to go into Parliament and essentially have their place in society at the cost of yours for determining rules? And how can you have faith that that person's going to get that done when you have no idea what they are, and realistically, you've probably only seen what they think on a pamphlet?
Right. Okay. So are you saying you want more of a referendum and people-led style system where instead of electing MPs every few years that make decisions on your behalf, you'd rather a more regular voting system where you can vote on individual policies and things?
Yeah, and I would also like it where citizen or people that live in the country, civilians, citizens, whatever, regular people aren't entirely reliant on the government and think, if they see a problem in society and say, that's a bit of a problem, I would love it if there was a platform for them to raise that. We kind of have that with that whole, you can make a petition, but I don't really know how seriously those get taken in this country.
It's a difficult thing because with a population of, well, I don't even know. Would you know the population of this country?
I think it's over 60 million.
Yeah. So people are no one's ever going to get heard properly. Like, well, sorry, not no one. The vast majority of the population are not really going to get heard. In the way you're talking about with, well, it might not be the way you're talking about, but there's always going to be a massive limit. You know, the people in the public eye, and the people that are elected are always going to be heard more than the average Joe and Jane.
Yeah, of course.
I guess the devil's advocate for the argument would be we elect these people to be representatives of what a particular area want. So that is the person we know, and maybe it could be said that we should get to know our local MPs and we should vote for our local MPs. Would that, if you started to look more at your local MPs and cared a lot less about the Prime Minister, for example, do you think that would help, or do you think the system itself is? You're saying about getting to know people. Like, if you knew a lot about the MPs in your area, and because there's platforms where you can go and meet them, and discussions. They're a lot more easy to access your local MPs than anyone at number 10. Would that help or not?
I think it's a good start, because I think a lot of people at the moment, they think like, oh, I'm voting for Jeremy Corbyn, oh, I'm voting for whoever the leader of the Tory party is at the moment, Boris Johnson. I'm voting for Boris Johnson. I can't believe I forgot that. But I think I think people believe in their mind that they are voting for these people, and it's like, well, actually, no, you're not. You're not electing your leader. You're electing your person to kind of stand up for what you believe in Parliament. That person is then affiliated to a party, and if that party gets the most people in it, then that leader becomes the leader of the country. It's a very convoluted system, I would feel much more comfortable if we got to elect. Maybe a better system would be, hey, we elect our local MP, we also get to elect the leader of the country.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's probably a good point. That a lot of people would agree with. When Theresa May became.
Yeah, so sorry to interrupt. It's just got me thinking. I think that example would be better than what we have now, but at the same time, I don't know if it's good. I need to be very wary how I word this. I don't necessarily think it's good to have a single leader in charge of an entire nation. That just seems like quite a maddening concept to me.
Well, it's not. It's difficult because there's different political systems everywhere. And the Prime Minister of this country has a lot less power than presidents, I think, of other countries. I think presidents have a bit more power, but I'm not, to be honest, I'm not 100% sure on that. But either way, let's just stick with this country. The Prime Minister doesn't have full power to do whatever they want. That's why there's MPs there because before the situation we're in now, where it's a massive majority, Tories struggled a lot more to get things through Parliament because there was people from different parties and different viewpoints pushing back. So I guess the democracy side of it sort of gets concentrated down and down. Where you have one representative from your area, and then that representative challenges Parliament. I don't see how the getting to know someone person is a systemic problem. I would say that's more of a problem with people's attitudes to, or people's understanding of how it works.
It's not feasible for one person to get on good terms with their entire constituency. I don't know how many people it is on average, like per vote of MP, but it's not feasible for everyone to get to know. Like you could do research and you can look up what these people are putting on, but man, that's a lot of marketing. And we know that a lot of what politicians say and then a lot of what they vote for are often two very different things. Sure,
definitely. And there's a huge, it's like we said in the last conversation we had, the Winston Churchill quote that democracy is the best of the bad ideas, or something along those lines.
Oh yes, I think the quote is, oh shit, what's the quote? Oh, it's that democracy is a horrendous idea until you consider all the other options.
Right, yeah, a lot better worded than I it was. Yeah. So, I forgot my point. The difficulty I see with, so you saying a better option might be voting for every policy, like the public voting for every policy.
Yeah, maybe that, or maybe we would, like for example, for the for the transport minister, for example, maybe we get to vote that person in.
The what list?
Like for each like section of government, like transport, for example, public transport, we get to vote someone in for that. I assume there's one for the military. We get to vote that person in.
I guess. I mean, I would be more I've got my own opinions about sort of where people should be in terms of their roles within government as well. But just to carry on with this point, I guess the argument is we elect these people because they are experts. They know more in the area. A lot of MPs have been just to get through the argument against what you're saying is they are in theory they're more they're expert in governance, they're more knowledgeable than the general person about general governments.
Well, you would hope so.
That's the theory. And if you have everyone voting all the time for policies, do you not think that everyone would vote to give more money to every single area of society? Because the way I see it is a good leader in government, a good MP, has the understanding of having to balance everything, and teachers are always going to want more money for schools. NHS is always going to want money for healthcare. The army is going to want more money because we need to be protected. The police for the same reason, but domestically, we need to end homelessness. It's a never-ending list of all these different areas.
Yeah, I see
the environment needs to be taken care of. And the thing is, if we leave it up to the public, public are always going to say there should be more money. But the problem with that is, then you have an economy that is tanked because all the money's spent. Because that's where I would see the problem with it. Whereas if you have someone who's representing you, they're representing you because they, in theory, obviously, but I think it's pretty good in this country. For example, like Donald Trump has had no public service experience, but he's president of the United States. Whereas this country, in general, it is a long process, flawed process, but a long process of doing a lot of public service, being an MP, visiting people in the community, all that sort of stuff, before you're anywhere near being in Parliament. So by then you'll sort of have an idea of what people want, where their values lie, and then you need to start making your priorities. And that's where your political parties differ. The Tories will be trying to keep the economy stable. They'll make sure we've got good sort of defences in terms of the army.
So just to try and address the first point you made here. So the argument that but then people are going to want more money for everything, and we don't have infinite amounts of money. It's checks and balances. I would say to that, if people want more money putting into things, what would you like money taking out of so that it can go into that?
Yeah, but that's the thing. With a vote, like how politically active do you expect people to be to vote this regularly? These are all very, civil servants and politicians need to discuss all of this thing in extreme detail. And there's lots of these little things in every area of society, every sort of sector that the general public, it's too much time for them to do, and they're not experts in that area.
So I'm going to go back to the idea that MPs, like you would expect MPs to be better educated on things generally. I would heavily criticize that, Because first of all, government has to deal with so many different problems. There's no way you can have a decent knowledge base on all of them, and not
No.
unless you're this like genius individual Rain Man kind of type. I don't know how many of those exist, or if they do exist. I'm sure there's like a handful of people that are just like deities compared to everyone else intellectually. But I really don't think MPs have a knowledge base properly on all of these things. And
No.
I wholly believe the current system right now doesn't really hold MPs accountable. I think what MPs say they're gonna do and then what they end up doing are two totally different things. With all this kind of like madness of media in the middle, that confuses things even more.
Yeah, and I think where I agree with you, or where I think we would agree, would be why was Michael Gove the Environment Secretary? Like, I
Okay,
think
so just to clarify here, as you know, I don't really know much about politics. Could you explain who Michael Gove is?
okay, yeah, he's just a Tory. Basically, he's a politician. He's been a politician for a long time. But I guess my point is, when MPs are voted in to Parliament, then they are placed into a position where they have to lead an entire sector, whether or not they have a vast knowledge and experience of that sector doesn't really seem to matter. Whereas I would much rather see MPs elected to Parliament. So the same situation now, let's just say, whatever, so Tories have got majority, but then the leads or the heads of each department, each sector, is an expert, is someone who, instead of having the health secretary be Matt Hancock, who it is at the moment, why isn't the health secretary someone who's been a doctor and a consultant for the NHS for the last 30 years?
Yeah, I think that's totally a great point.
And one of the wonderful things I thought that Boris Johnson did, and I know a lot of other countries have done it as well, it wasn't like it was his idea, but having two experts either side of them when they were answering these questions, because I don't know if you've been watching the conference things on the BBC every day, but the politician in the middle is usually is just regurgitating a script, and no matter what the question is, they regurgitate a script. And then the two experts either side, they're actually answering the questions, and they're like, "Oh, I don't know," or they're giving the data they have, and they're actually trying to answer the question. And I think having a leader who's a politician, fair enough, but then leading each department, I think an expert in their field would be a lot more effective.
Yeah, I totally agree with you on that. It's madness to me that we put people in these positions that are grossly, and I mean grossly, uneducated, unprepared, unknowledgeable on what they're trying to do. Yeah, I also, a personal belief of mine is with humans, humans are like any form of life, and generally, as far as I can tell, life likes to grow and get bigger. The problem with government is, and all humans are guilty of this, is that they are a body of people, and what does any body of people want to do? They want to grow. So then, because of that, they grow into areas that really government, in a lot of people's opinion, it's not black and white, of course, but in a lot of people's opinion, they get involved in a lot of areas where they shouldn't really be involved. And they just keep taking this money in, maybe increasing taxes, or maybe as it just goes up with inflation and population. But they just try to get in more money, get in more taxes, get bigger, grow into areas where really they shouldn't really need departments, and you can just kind of let that aside.
Okay, well, let's get specific with that then, because that is a general libertarian or right-wing view, but I know that you are happy about more funding in the NHS, so I don't want to paint you with any large brush. So specifically, where do you think the government should not be?
So if I really try and break it down on nitty gritty, here's definitely what I think government should be in. I think they definitely police I definitely
Yeah.
think that we need a police force, military as well. I definitely think just because we've had peace for not even 100 years, like man, humans are chaotic. You want a military there in case shit goes down, and you also want a military there to help out with floods and when natural disasters hit. Like I wholly believe having a military is a great way to go.
And the military has helped in this crisis as well. I think they assisted in the construction of the Nightingale Hospital in London as well.
Hell yeah! You know when shit hits the fan, the first people you're gonna call in the military, and if you don't put resources into that, then when shit goes down, you've got no one to call.
Okay, cool. So police and military.
Police, military, NHS for sure as well. I do believe at a baseline, everyone should have a decent, accessible level of healthcare. Of course, the government making laws and covering all of that stuff. I do also think they should play a big part in, as well as the courting system.
Education.
I don't know about that one. My problem is that I had I had an education that was all by the state, and I actually think it was kind of poor. I don't think that's a fault that it was paid for by the state. I think that's more a fault that education in this country is just a bit shit. Okay, well, we'll say education. I can totally see an argument for why the state should provide that. Education is a good way to go. Outside of those things, I don't know.
Environment.
Yes, yeah, I think any body of humans should always play a role in the environment. It's everyone's kind of it's all of our duties at this point. I mean, it really is.
Okay, well, let's just say for now that in general, the main sectors of government, you seem to be happy with how they are in terms of covering that in general.
What I'm not happy as they are. I believe they should exist. Like for example, I'm a fan of the police. I totally think we should have a police force in society. I think you need people to say, hey, look, here are the rules we agreed to. The problem I have with the police is I think they spend a lot of their time doing things that the average person is like, yo, why are you spending time on that? Like, for example, this whole obviously bad, detrimental war on drugs, the fact that like a lot of drugs are still illegal is madness to me, because all we've done is spend a lot of money fighting it. There's some compounds that aren't even realistically bad for people, and because of that, we haven't put money into researching their benefits either. So, and I think police spending all this time chasing that down is like there are far bigger, far worse, heinous crimes being committed than the likes of that.
So this is, so this would be an example then of an area you think the government should be pulling back from.
It's complicated because really the police's job is to enforce the rules and the laws that the government put in place. So maybe my criticism isn't of the police, but it's more my criticism is of government enforcing laws that really don't benefit us and actually cost us quite a bit.
Yeah. I think that sounds to me like what you were saying as well. You're not criticizing the Bobby on the beat that's doing their job.
No. If anything, I'm very thankful that the police do their job. And I don't know any police officers, but I'm sure that there's a decent amount of police officers who know full well. Like I smoke a lot of cannabis. I've walked past police officers smoking a joint and they don't give a shit. And I believe that's because they know that's just a waste of their time. They know there's far bigger things that their time would get a higher return on investment looking into.
Have you ever been in a situation where the police have confiscated or they've fined you or anything like that with
never.
No.
I
have.
Oh really?
Yeah. And it was again, this is just an anecdote, it's just my experience with one time, but we were smoking weed in a park, and the police, it was really dramatic. The police sped from the main road. They drove on the grass in the park, so where a car is not allowed to go, past trees, and came right up to us and just hid the weed and all that. But they were actually looking. There was a robbery or a mugging or something in the area, and we were a group of guys. I think there was one girl as well that sort of fit the description in terms of a group of people in the area, and they were questioning us and all that sort of thing, and they realised that we weren't the same people, but they did frisk us and they found the weed and then they tipped it out, but they just gave us a warning. So we got a little slip. I can't remember what colour it was. It might have been pink or whatever, but they just gave us a warning slip, which obviously it didn't really mean anything. But
you see to me, there's a like don't get me wrong. I think great job for the police for like getting down there and talking to you. I actually, for me, they broke laws if they took your stuff and dumped it on the floor. I think destroying someone else's property is a crime.
What the weed?
Yeah.
Yeah, but they're not technically committing a crime, are they?
I can appreciate that, and I can also totally appreciate that. Hey, their job is to enforce laws that other people put in place.
And you could tell, to be honest, they didn't care. They didn't care. Like.
They could have just been running on autopilot, like, oh, I've had to do this so many times, it's just what I do now.
Yeah, and it's not like they scattered it around or they confiscated it or they threw it in the bin. They literally just put it on the floor in one place, so you could easily just pick it all up.
Oh, I see. Sorry, I painted like a very different picture in my head. That's probably them going, oh, like I would hope anyway, that's them going, okay, I have to do this, but let's just do it in the laziest way possible.
Yeah, and I think this is somewhere where I think we do agree, but I think it would be interesting to play devil's advocate, because I know my dad, so he's retired from the police, and when I've spoken to him, I don't know how his views have shifted, but he seems very against legalizing any drugs. So I'll try and play devil's advocate. So one thing he said to me once is, in his experience, he's found that when people start smoking weed, for example, it likely leads on to harsher and harsher drugs.
Right. So he doesn't think people should smoke weed because
let's not say here. Let's just say
for argument's sake.
So this is me saying that. Yeah. Because I don't want it to be something where he can't say his own point of view.
And I can appreciate that.
But yeah. So if someone came to you with an argument of like, it leads to harder and harder drugs, which is where you get more and more problem. Which is a point. I would agree that I wouldn't want to see a lot of people doing harder drugs. To be honest, it's not. Even though I agree, I definitely agree with the legalization or the decriminalisation of weed, but I'm a little bit hazy on other drugs. But let's just go for now with. Sorry
to interrupt you there, man. Essentially, what you're saying is the argument that weed will take people into a darker path with more nefarious drugs.
Yeah, I know from people I know how getting addicted to narcotics or alcohol, it can really mess up your whole life. So I guess it can be starting with weed. It can be a gateway to all these other harder drugs that can mess your life up even more.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that weed is for everyone, for sure. I definitely think there are mental health problems associated with it. I've met people, totally stable people, totally rational people, and they're like, nah, dude, I can't smoke weed. That just fucks me up something special. For me, I think it's got great effects. For other people, not so much. I think everyone should be empowered to make that decision for themselves and figure out the correct answer. I'm only going off myself anecdotally, and I know a shitload of people that smoke weed. I know very few people that do hard drugs like cocaine, heroin, any of that kind of ketamine. I know a shitload. I know a lot of cannabis users who are professional people smoke. For context here, I work in the games industry, which might be why. But I know a lot of people in this industry that they smoke a hell of a lot of weed. They're really talented, really hard workers, and I would say the majority of people I know that do smoke cannabis don't generally. In fact, none of them go into harder drugs like cocaine or heroin or ketamine.
Right. Yeah.
I'd also throw it out there that yes, weed has its problems, and it can be a gateway drug, but so can alcohol, and that's totally legal.
Yeah, and this, I'm now going back to your side because I agree with you too much on this to play devil's advocate.
I think you did a great job of just going, okay, if I really just try and separate these two and latch on to whatever argument these people have, I guess there is some validity to weed can be a gateway drug.
Yeah, but yeah, I agree. I mean, that's the main problem I have is that just in my experience, the people that are against smoking weed, even just smoking it, not even necessarily it being legal, but these same people usually drink, and they always drink. As in they always. When I encounter people like this, they are drinkers, and it takes a while for the connection to be. It's such a separate thing. Again, it's just in my experience. It seems like alcohol, you can't have it in the same boat as weed, and I just don't understand why.
Yeah, I totally get where you're coming from, because I've had so many people, like a lot of my friends know I smoke a lot of cannabis, and I say, oh, would you like something? They go, no, I don't do drugs, but they'll have a bottle of beer in their hand, and I'm like, but there's alcohol in that, which is a drug. Like for me, I guess I define a drug as something that alters your mental state. And when I tried it, and there's a lot of research and evidence to show that, look, realistically, cannabis is far easier on your body, far less destructive for you than alcohol. And I'm someone who, I mean, I went to university with you, I'm a big drinker. I enjoy having a drink. I don't drink anywhere as much now as I used to, but I still like going for a night out, having a couple of drinks, doing some silly stuff, having some funny stories the next day. I love that. But as someone that's done both a lot of alcohol and a lot of cannabis, for sure, alcohol's way worse. You don't get a fucking hangover off cannabis, but if I drink enough for the next 2 days, it can screw me up heavily if I'm drinking alcohol.
Yeah, and I'll just say from my own personal point of view, I used to smoke weed. I used to drink. I don't drink anymore. I don't smoke weed. If I had the choice, I much prefer drinking. But that doesn't stop me from seeing the disparity that, like, if you just look at the statistics and the health problems, alcohol, I would argue, is much worse for you.
I would totally agree with that, like 100%.
It's difficult to quantify because alcohol is illegal and weed isn't, but it
is, but it isn't, because if we use a lot of examples, I know I keep interrupting you, sorry. If we use a lot of examples, I can't remember the state of Colorado, which was the first state in the United States to fully legalize cannabis, not just for medical, just go, you know what, this is a free thing, buy it, sell it, do whatever you want, it's now taxable. From that, as soon as they legalized it, they saw that the crime rates, the poverty, these things just started going down. And part of the reason for that is because it's now legal and you're getting money from it, that money can then go into fixing some of the problems it can cause.
Yeah, that was one of the most powerful arguments I heard. Because I've sort of felt this way for a while, but then I think it was like a year or two ago, it was just a question time thing, and it was a police officer, and he was on question time, and he asked a question, and his 2 points, which I thought was so powerful, is if you decriminalise, I know there is a difference between legalise and decriminalise, but let's just say decriminalise for now, something like weed. 2 amazing things happen. Not small things, 2 big things. 1, the police have more time. So that's not just time telling people not to do, and it's like the paperwork and
the admin,
and I guess they have to store it somewhere. I don't know, but all of that. So that's freed up for real crimes like murder and other things that are much more important for police to deal with. So that's one very powerful argument. It's more time for police to do much more serious things. And the second one is it takes power away from criminals.
Yes,
And that,
please continue, but that's such a big point.
And
Any
that is-
criminal underworld created from buying, selling drugs, which at this point is a big portion of Mexico, gone.
yeah,
Just
exactly.
gone.
The things
Can't
that we
support
can-
itself. No money towards it anymore.
Exactly. The things that we all agree on, whatever your side of political aisle, is human trafficking, murders, gang culture, in where it's gang warfare and things. These things need to be stamped out and they need to stop. These things are heavily linked with drug selling, and the more that we
No,
can
they're
take-
heavily linked with illegal drug selling.
Exactly, yeah. And the more that we can legalize something like, especially just the first step, weed, I think it'd be, if just for now, it's just stigma weed, that just takes more power away from criminals and gives that power to the police. And I think that, I just can't see why that wouldn't be a great thing.
Yeah, I 100% agree. To me, beyond all of this, there's also a major ethical problem for me that does invoke a little bit of my ego, where just the act of saying, person A saying to person B, hey, you're not allowed to put that inside you. This activity that has nothing to do with me, I'm allowed to say no to. It is fully, to me, within person B's right to go, what? Who put you above me in the ordering of my life? What the hell? You can't do that. I'm not a prisoner. That to me is oppressive behavior. Get the hell out of here. What right do you have?
So around what people consume.
Yeah. Here's the
Yeah.
thing. I'm pretty anti-refined sugar. Like, don't get me wrong, I partake in it once in a while because it is delicious. But I think when you look into it, it's super bad. It's causing a lot of underlying health problems as well. I super don't think people should have it. But I don't think it should be made illegal. Because
Yeah.
as soon as you make it illegal, it becomes this much worse, bigger problem.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think if there's an example of something that people do to themselves that's negative that is illegal or should be illegal.
Well, if we're talking about consequences of health, alcohol is a big one. But and that's totally legal. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying we should make alcohol legal. I totally think it should be
I guess
legal.
Here's an argument against that then, because you're not just harming yourself. If you like, let's just I obviously agree with you with alcohol, and to a certain extent you could say caffeine and things like that. But
Yeah.
when someone ingests something that distorts their perception, that makes them more dangerous. So I guess that would be an argument that it's not just you that you're affecting. If you have some sugar, then it's not like you're going to go on a rampage.
Okay. So let's say hypothetically there is evidence that someone, when they're on cocaine, has become very violent. So if we use that as an example, I would say if it's been documented and well known and it's gone to court and everything that someone had taken cocaine, gotten very aggressive on cocaine, and maybe it wasn't just a one-off thing. It happened like a couple of times, and it was really the evidence was obvious that this person gets very aggressive, very hostile, verbally, physically, whatever. When they're on cocaine, then I do think it's up to the court to say, okay, we're putting you on a cocaine ban because it seems like you've got a real problem with this and it's causing a problem in society. But I think you would need evidence because...
But surely there is plenty of evidence. Like, okay, now I'm just saying drugs in general, and I do, weed is definitely the least harmful. Like, I don't, it's very few people are gonna go out on a rampage with weed, but alcohol, cocaine, other drugs that is a powerful argument against just substances in general that distort people. A lot of crimes, a vast majority of crimes and domestic abuse and violence when people are intoxicated in some way, it massively increased the risk of them hurting someone. I think that's a powerful argument as for drugs as a whole, and that's where I can see where people are worried and where the police, it's like, well, actually, if less people have a distorted view on the world and less people have a higher risk of hurting someone, then that's a good thing. So maybe we should, as a whole, be drugs.
I can understand. I can understand this argument, but at the same time, what about the overwhelmingly larger examples of, if we use alcohol, people that do drink alcohol and it's not a problem for them, and they're a very healthy, functioning adult on it.
Yeah.
Because then you're saying to them, hey, because we don't trust all these other people, you're not allowed to have this. And it's like, what did I do?
Yeah, but then that can play into the gun argument as well.
The gun argument.
Yeah, well, if you take what you just said about alcohol and use it with guns.
Well, I'm not anti-gun. I'm anti.
No, but I think the point is, would you be anti people being able to build nuclear weapons in their house? The more that people, the greater the risk of someone committing harm to other people. That sort of needs to be nipped in the bud. That's why there's programs to identify and stop terrorism in terms of, I've forgotten the name, where people are I've forgotten the word, but yeah, they end up being targeted young, and they see materials that are that makes them at higher risk of doing a terrorist attack, whether it's alt-right or otherwise. So when someone is becoming more of a risk to society, in general, the police need to do something about it before it goes that far. And drugs and alcohol, as a whole, I include alcohol in this, they create a higher risk. And I guess...
Well, when they're illegal, they do. Oh, sorry, no, alcohol's a problem when it's legal as well.
Yeah,
right.
alcohol's a massive problem. And so I don't think necessarily... I definitely agree that alcohol should be seen in the same thing as other drugs, definitely.
Well, it's sometimes more so.
Exactly. But it's whether we decide to ease the restriction on these things that could increase the risk, or whether we put alcohol and put more restrictions on alcohol. Do you know what I mean? I can see the argument for that.
Do you know what Portugal did?
Yeah, they decriminalised all drugs, didn't they?
They did, and from what I understand, the difference before and after in domestic violence and violent crime in general was insane. I don't know if for sure, but I've had a lot of people bring this up to me, that when after Portugal decriminalised all drugs and made it so things were accessible, but kind of in safe environments, everything just all the violence went down so much. I work with this guy, a good friend of mine called Luis. He's Portuguese. He's from Portugal, and he said that when he was growing up, that there were, I can't remember what the big drug over there is, but he said there were just addicts of it everywhere. It was plaguing the streets. Like it was pretty uncomfortable. But then the difference when they decriminalized everything was crazy. Way fewer addicts. He used to overstate it massively and be like, oh, it's crazy how just fewer they were. So I really... Oh, go on.
So I guess I'd also, again, I'm playing devil's advocate, but I also do sort of find the other argument compelling. It's also then useful to look at Singapore's crime rates and maybe compare the crime rates in Singapore to Portugal. It's always difficult when comparing countries because there's so many other factors. But Singapore, if you bring drugs into Singapore, then you're getting the death penalty.
But Singapore is it's very different to us in a lot of ways. It's much more oppressive environment than the West is. Much more. Like Singapore doesn't have freedom of speech. Really, you can't really speak out against the government. Well, you can speak out against the government, but it's met with hostility. They still have quite arduous. Like you can still get like I'm pretty sure. I'll need to follow up to make sure this is correct, but I'm pretty sure you can still get beaten for littering and things like that. So I don't.
Yeah, I actually don't know much about.
Singapore is a very oppressive place. There's someone I follow on Twitter called, I think her name is Melissa Shen, who is from Singapore.
Yeah.
And she puts it, because she knows it far better than I, and the way she described it is very in depth. Anyone interested on this topic, I would encourage going to Twitter, checking out Melissa Shen, and seeing what she's written about it. She also did a great podcast with Joe Rogan on it as well.
Yeah, I started listening to her there, and I was like, oh, has she written any books? Because I was like, she's so, yeah, I would recommend anyone else to listen to the Joe Rogan podcast with her as well, because it's enlightening. She talks a lot about China as well. It's really, interesting. So that's a good recommendation. Cool. Okay, so we're going to have to start to wrap up soon, unfortunately. It's gone very quickly, as always. But so would you say that you are for decriminalising all drugs?
All drugs, I would say. Decriminalising all drugs.
All at once?
I don't know how you do it.
Right.
I think you'd need someone much more educated on it.
Sure.
On things like addiction and whatnot on it than me.
Sure.
I don't know how you do it. If history has proven anything, it's a banning substances prohibition has never worked, and it has always got a 100% failure chance. 100%. Like just always, it's always fails. Way back when they made alcohol illegal in the United States, you could still get alcohol. It was commonplace. It was just now there was much more crime associated with it, and less money was going to other areas of the country that needed it.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. I guess it's similar to the whole thing of religious people trying to stop the distribution of condoms to stop people having sex. It's like people are going to have sex. And
is that true? Is that something that really happened?
Yeah, that's one of the ridiculous, because more fundamentalist sort of religions, because they don't want people to have sex before marriage. They think the way to do that is to completely stigmatize and completely stop people having sex before marriage. Whereas actually the more effective thing to do to stop sort of unwanted pregnancies and disease and all that is to just put a condom on or have any sort of contraception. But I think we'll sort of finish it up there. But I know that we could carry on talking for a long, long time.
We could, and it is always a pleasure talking to you, man.
Yeah, you too. And I just want to say before you go, I'm just going to do a message to anyone listening. Please feel free to continue this conversation by commenting with any thoughts you have, or contacting me to come on the show yourself to chat about it on the phone. But the things we sort of covered in this conversation, just to reflect on. We talked about government systems and how they're set up, where they should be more democratic, more powers to the people. We chatted about marijuana and legalization and the police. Was there anything else we sort of covered?
Nothing I can think of.
Yeah, I think they were the main things. So thanks a lot, Nick. I really appreciate you coming on.
Thank you so much for having me, man. It's always a pleasure talking to you.
Sweet. Yeah, you too. Take care.
Take it easy, man. Bye-bye.
There's something else I'd like to say to any listeners, all three of you. This podcast is an ongoing process. It's an ongoing experiment. I'm trying things out and seeing what works and what doesn't. And so any feedback on this or other episodes will be really appreciated. I don't want this podcast to just be for my own enjoyment. The goal is for it to benefit people in some way. And constructive feedback is the best way to know if this goal is being achieved. If I don't know something's rubbish, then I'll just keep producing rubbish. If I don't know something's good, then I'll just stop producing anything good. And also, if you think of anyone that you know that would be a good guest for me to chat to, then please let me know. I would love the opportunity to speak to a wide range of people about an even wider range of subjects. Thank you for taking the time to listen, and I hope you continue the conversation. Bye for now.